Okay, so basically for the pre-production part of this, I just took this random like toilet, I think it's like paper towel tube, and just put a bunch of tracking markers on it, and it ended up like this. Do you like that transition? Yeah, I didn't intend for it to be good, but yeah, basically it just looks like this. Okay, so the next thing I did was I just basically just lined up my shot. Then I just stepped in front of the camera and recorded this shot where I'm just going to move the tube and just sort of show it at different angles just to show that I'm actually, tracking instead of just holding it still. But that will basically just be the shot. So this is what I recorded. Okay, so basically what I did next is I just trimmed the shot so that I got the part that I needed. I also blurred the background, but that's just for privacy reasons and stuff, so I don't really have to explain that. But basically I just trimmed the shot using B and N to set the timeline or the viewing frames, or what it's basically the section that it renders out. Then I just exported that to an MP4 and brought it into Blender. Okay, then with the shot trimmed, basically what I did is I opened the shot, and just for reference it should look like this. So it should just be a still shot of you moving the object. And what I did is I just placed tracking markers on it. If you want to know my tracking marker settings, I use the location and rotation solver. And the reason why I chose the location and rotation solver is because it just seemed to work better. I did try the location, rotation, and scale, but they seemed to drift a little bit. So that's why I chose location and rotation. It really depends on your shot. If you're moving the tracking object a lot, like really far back, then I would suggest to use location, rotation, and scale. But for me, I just use location and rotation, and I basically just went command click. And also, if you don't see this outside box, just click Alt S. And basically, I just made sure the pattern size was small enough so that it didn't drift to other trackers. And by the way, this outside is the search size, so if your shot's motion is really fast, scale it up. But for me, I didn't need to do that. But then I basically just tracked forward, and as you can see, it's working pretty well. And then I just did that for several markers on the roll. Now, one thing that I did notice is that if you put too many markers in their center, it will track in a way that gives you a result that sort of moves the object relative to only the center, and it won't really give it any proper rotation. So what you want to do is you want to have variance in the trackers that you're selecting, because if you don't choose trackers on the edge, then it won't create a realistic solve. But yeah, basically that's what I did. I just tracked on this object, and once you have all your trackers, you just want to I think the best option is to use audio keyframe, and if it gives you a high solve like 30 or something, then just like adjust the keyframe slightly and it should work. But since it's object, these options won't be available, and you'll just click solve. And ideally, you should be getting an under like 1 pixel solve error, and then you'll move on to scene setup. Just create a camera and give it the camera solver constraint. And then what you do from there is you just move the camera so that it makes sense where it is in 3D space. So here this makes sense because the camera is facing straight forward. The next step is to just go into the viewport overlays and enable motion tracking. This will give you these little markers. Let me hide this. This will give you these little markers that you basically got from your track, and you just want to position your object so that it matches those trackers in the way that they're facing, but also at the same time matches how it should look in the shot. Now, the reason why the sword is so big is because the paper towel roll was quite big in my hand, so I kind of had to adjust it. And then if your motion is too jittery, what you want to do is set this, you can click this button, constraint to F curve, then click key, smooth, Gaussian, and then just adjust it to your liking. For me, I think I did around like 30%. Yeah, and as you can see, that looks better. Now, this will be an issue later, and as I already said, I needed to scale this up to match the size of the paper towel roll, but even then, if I scaled it up all the way, it would look a little bit too big, so I just tried to give it a reasonable scale without making it super big, and what you'll see in the final shot is that I have to paint in like my hand, and that will cause some issues, and it's why you should probably not use such a big object when you're trying to track like this. Ideally, it should have a smaller handle so that your hand isn't like wrapping around such a large object. And then for export settings, what you want to do is just make sure that your frame rate is whatever you recorded on. For me, I recorded on 60 FPS, and then whatever resolution was, or I think I actually left it at the default Blender resolution. That's okay. 1920 to 1080 is fine, but if you want to go higher, you can. And then for the export like file format, I did OpenEXR on RGBA with full float. WAA is much better because it compresses it a lot so that your file sizes aren't so large, and it doesn't really have any visible difference. And then for this shot, I had to use override to make it ACCG. I don't exactly fully understand the color spaces and everything, but yeah, I have this ACCG as my sequencer, and I'll show you how to work with it when you export. But if you're not sure if your file, the file that you're exporting, is actually in the ACCG color space, you just need to do a render test. So just do render image, and then when it's done, you want to click image, save as, and then save onto your computer. And with that file, just bring it into After Effects, and I'll show you how to interpret it properly. But yeah, one more thing, for my render settings, I just used the 0.01 noise threshold, and 50 samples is good, denoise is good. If you do get any washiness in your render, you might want to increase the sample count, but for me, this 50 samples was fine. So now in After Effects, what I did is I brought in the EXR sequence that I exported, and I made sure that I right-clicked, selected Interpret Footage, Main, Color, and then just made sure it was ACCG. Also, if it gives you the wrong frame rate for your image sequence and it seems like slow or fast, just make sure that it's 60 frames per second or whatever you put it as. Then what I did is I imported the original clip that we object tracked before on top, so it looks like currently, if you just had those two things that I said to import, it would look like this with the sword on top and the base here. The next thing I did is I just added some keyframes to the sword just to make it look a little bit more matched to the paper towel roll. And then the next step was to remove the paper roll from the shot. So what I did was I took a roto of my body and then just put that into the stack, and then added a paint in of my hand. What I had to do is I had to take another photo of my hand, but without holding the paper towel roll. If I did this again, as you can see, it doesn't match. If I did this again, what I would do is I would record that in the same shot, because I was editing on a different day, and as you can see, the lighting is off. I basically just took a photo of my hand, made some masks, and added keyframes to make it move with my hand. If you want to look at this closer, it's like this. As you can see, I have my hand cut out. I just masked it out with the pen tool right here, and I just drew a mask around it, and then I just positioned this to move with my hand, and then I added a mask on top just to make it match. And now that we have this here, my hand is basically in the shot, so all we need to do is just remove this paper towel roll, and what I did is I just took a clean plate right here. It's just like a frame from, you know how we cropped the shot before? I just went into that composition and took a freeze frame from where I was like standing further back and didn't have my hand forward. And I just took that and put it into this composition so that the clean plate right here was above this base layer so that it hid the paper towel roll. And as you can see, there's like this little edge leading through right here, and that's because the mask doesn't cover that area. And basically what's happening is that the roto is on top of the clean plate, and as you can see here, you can see like the edges of my hand, like the softness kind of going away because the rotoscope doesn't have that. But yeah, that's what I did to remove the paper towel from the shot. And then what I did is I just added the sword on top, and then now we're almost there. The last step is to just add my hand and some shadows. So what I did is I rotoscoped the roto. Basically what I did is I just rotoscoped parts of my hand that would make sense to go on top of the roll, and I just put those in its own roto, and then just put that on top of the sword, and that gives you this effect where it looks like my hand is actually on top of the sword. And then lastly, for the shadows, that was pretty simple. I just took the roto of my hand over the sword, and then I just added a drop shadow effect to it, and as you can see, that gives this effect. And the levels is just to match it with the darkest points of the shot. And then the last step is that I layered those shadows over the sword and then just track matted them to the sword so that they would only appear on the sword and instead of appearing on my hand, which would look kind of weird. Overall, this looks pretty decent, and it's pretty simple, just a couple of steps, and it gives you this nice result.